Hello and happy last day of Halloween. Well, it is actually Halloween day. As usual, I start with the acrylic paint, 2 coats of it. I do I think I'm using a sap green there on the main body of him. And then I use burnt sienna for his little things that join his head together and his stem. And a yellow for the outside of his eyes and a black for his pupils. And I apologize if you hear any squeaking or grunting because my parrot is in here and he takes offense when I talk. So I'm still just doing the coat of acrylic paint, and also before the acrylic paint I always prime it, usually with white paint depending on the color that I'm going to paint it, sometimes with black. And I'm not slowing this down because it's just simply painting. It doesn't need to be perfect or neat, you just need to get a couple of good layers in there. So for his second coat of green, I added a little bit of white to the sap green to make it lighter, because while I was looking at him I didn't like how dark he was. And now I start with the pan pastels. So I just want to get started on his shadows. So I use the Chromium Oxide Green Extra Dark, and I just go over all the shadows and the creases. Now this little Franken pumpkin is really quite quick and easy. And after finishing the shadows, I then get the Chromium Oxide Green and just go over everything and blend it all in together, just to make it look nice and smooth. I don't like things looking sharp, so usually when you do shadows or highlights, you then go over it with the mid-tone color. And so the next step is to do the highlights. So I get the Chromium Oxide Green Tint and just go over all the parts that I think should be a little bit brighter than everything else. And then when I've done that, I get the Chromium Oxide Green Extra Dark and go over some more of the shadows and the creases. Just trying to blend everything together. And don't forget to do the inside of his nose hole with the Chromium Oxide Green Extra Dark, and the little outside bits of his nostrils with the Chromium Oxide Green Tint. And this is a quick and easy step. I just get the burnt sienna extra dark and go over the creases there on his stem, and then I go over where the shadows are going to be on those little bits that staple the top of his head together. So this is just going over those little bits that staple his head together, going over where the shadows would be with the burnt sienna extra dark. So like I said before, this one is really quick and easy, and this is just doing the exact same as what I've just done. So I go over the shadows with the Chromium Oxide Green Extra Dark, and then I go over the highlights with the Chromium Oxide Green Tint, and then blend it together with the Chromium Oxide. And you can see how his highlights and that are starting to be visible, and that's what you want, but as soon as you spray it with fixative, it tends to dull it, so that's why you have to do a few layers to build it up. And now just going over the shadows again with the Chromium Oxide Green extra dark, just trying to get them darker. And then I start to use black on the shadows on the stem because I couldn't quite get it dark enough with the burnt sienna extra dark, so I decided to go to black, and I liked the black a lot more than I did the burnt sienna extra dark. So like I said, I just go by what I look at it and I change things up. And I also go over a few of the other shadows that should be really dark with the black, so the separation of his head there and some shadows underneath the pieces that hold his head together and inside his nose. And I also go over his eyes with the black, and then in between the gaps of his teeth, where there's going to be dark shadows, I also use the black. And then using the bright yellow green, I go around his eyes and the bright yellow green tint to do the highlights on his eyes. And this layer here is exactly the same as what I just did in the previous two. So the Chromium Oxide Green extra dark in the shadows and the black in the dark shadows, and the Chromium Oxide Green tint on the highlights, and then shadows in between his teeth and just doing his eyes, and darkening up where the stem meets the top of his head because there's going to be a shadow there as well. And this is just basically exactly the same as what I've done on the other layers. And this print is good that it has all the creases in it, and it makes it really easy to do all these shadows and highlights. Now this guy was pretty quick and easy, so I didn't really slow this down very much at all. And now I get some titanium white acrylic paint and just do the reflections on his eyes. I use a dotting tool just to make it easy. And then I go back to the bright yellow green tint and the bright yellow green to go around his eyes again. And now just doing some more highlights on him. And this is the burnt sienna tint, and I'm doing the highlights on the stem and on the bits that hold his head together. And I really do apologize if you can hear that bird, but he really doesn't like it when I talk. He's in a mood. Now this is just the burnt sienna and the black going over the shadows again. And I do a line of black in between the nails on his head. And with that, he's pretty much done, except for I used some UV resin on his eyes just to gloss them up a little bit. And yeah, he's pretty much done. I've actually been trying a different fixative. I haven't been using Mr. Super Clear because even though I really enjoy that one, it's very expensive and it's sometimes difficult to get in Australia. So I've just been trying a normal fixative that I get and it's actually been working. So yay!